Hey, I'm Steve Krenz. Welcome to this lesson. Quick little introduction into chord inversions. Turning a chord upside down. Now, there is going to be a PDF that goes along with this. I don't have this quite yet, but there is going to be a PDF that'll go along with this, so you can check down in the YouTube description down below after this lesson is produced, and there'll be a link down there for it. So what do I mean by chord inversions? Inversions. Well, let's think about this. A chord is a combination of certain tones. You know, a C, an E, and a G. As long as I have those three notes, the first in the key of C, the first, the third, and the fifth typically, some type of third, sometimes it's minor third, sometimes it's major third, some type of fifth, sometimes it's an augmented fifth, sometimes it's a diminished fifth, but it's usually a 1, 3, and a 5 in any sort of key. As long as I have those notes in it, I've got a chord. Okay, so in the key of C, the 1, 3, and 5 would be a C, E, and a G. In the key of G, the 1, 3, and 5 would be G, B, and D. That's the first, third, and fifth steps of the G major scale. Okay, so you end up with that sort of combination, and usually that's kind of where everybody stops, but it's actually a little bit more involved with that. It's not just 1, 3, and 5. I can put those 1, 3, and 5 anywhere. I was looking for some alphabet blocks. Remember, like the kids used to play with, and you imagine the C at the bottom, the E, and the G. But as long as I have them in any order, what if I move the C to the top, and then I'm just left with E, G, C? Still a C chord, mind you, it's just a different order of the notes. What if I take that lowest tone, that E, and put that block up on top, so I'm going to raise it up an octave, so now I've got G, C, and E. So here's the first one, C, E, G, E, G, C, and G, C, E. So I'm just, same notes, say C, E, and a G, and I'm just changing the order, and I'm putting different things on the bottom. Okay, so when I put usually chords have the root on the bottom. That's what we tend to play a lot of in guitar. A C chord is like this. You may have a bunch of E's, a bunch of G's, and a bunch of C's, but there's going to generally be a C at the bottom. When they teach you a G chord, they teach you this one. Again, with the G, the root as the bottom, as the lowest note in the voicing, which is a good, pleasant, very stable, very, it sounds like home. Okay, it doesn't want to go anywhere. It sounds stable. If I turn a D chord, you generally play this, with a D as the lowest note in there. But you can have the other notes in there. So if I went back to my C chord, what if I added instead of the E as or instead of the C as the lowest tone, what if I add the E as the lowest tone? Do you hear how it's still a C chord? But when I add that E in the bass, it gets a different character. It gets a different quality. It's like you have a blue crayon, but now we've got 3 different colors, 3 different shades of blue that we can play around with. So we're no longer dealing with 8 colors. We've got all these variations of colors within them. A D chord can be a D, but it can also be a D with an F sharp in the bass or an A in the bass. And each one of them has a slightly different shade to that chord. It's still the chord, but it's just a different quality, a different timbre sound in that. And we can use that to our advantage. So instead of, a C chord being this, we can now have a C chord be this, or even this. That's if I put the G as the lowest tone, the 5th as the lowest tone, I end up with this sort of a sound, which is still a C chord. There's the C. But it still sounds stable, but it's not home. It's not home bass. Okay, it's somewhere other than home. But when you have the 3rd in the bass, that has a very sweet sort of a sound to it. It almost sounds like it wants to go somewhere. So when you put the 3rd in the bass, that first inversion we call that, when you put the 3rd note of the scale is the lowest tone in that. It has a sweet sound if I'm doing it on a major chord, and it sounds like it wants to go somewhere. So in a progression, we tend to use that to help us maybe to get to the 4 chord. So if I have a progression that's maybe a C, to an F, and I wanted to create a little walk up to that F. Maybe I could go C, E in the bass. Do you see how that E in the bass really helped get us to that F, which is the 4 chord in the key of C? What if I was in the key of G? And I'm going between, it's 1 and 4, which would be G, C. But I'm going to slip in a G with a B in the bass. That suddenly gives the chord movement. I haven't changed the chord. I've just changed the inversion of the chord, the order of notes. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's what inversions. So I want to expand your mind a bit in how you interpret music. A C chord is not this. Now the Mel Bay Chord Bible tells you a C chord is this, but a C chord is just any type of combination of a C note, an E note, and a G note. So this is a C chord. This is a C chord. This is a C chord, G, C, E. What about this? E, G, C. What about this? G, C, E. What about G, E, G, C? That's a C chord. All of these, C, G, E. What about G, E, C? Let's see, what else can we? E, C, G. All of those are C chords. How many did we go through? We went through probably about 10 of them right there. As many ways as you can think to combine a C, an E, and a G, you've got a C chord. So inversions are just different notes other than the root in your chord voicings. And so we don't have to go as complicated as maybe pianists would have to go, because they're constantly dealing with inversions. On guitar, we kind of generally simplify that a little bit, and we think about them a little bit differently. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite chord inversions. Let's first talk about open chords, like we were in the key of C. So what are some ways I could do this? Well, if I play my regular C like that, but what if I add the low E in the bass? That would be a C with an E in the bass. How we notate that in music, you see a C, then you see a slash, then an E underneath it or beside it. So now that's not telling you to play two different chords. Some guys think that, it's a C chord and an E chord at the same time. Nope, no. It's a C chord. Whatever's above the slash is the chord. Whatever's underneath the slash is the bass note, the lowest note of the chord. Okay, there would be the fifth. So they sound different. Here's a C with the E in the bass. Here's a C with a G in the bass. I'm still keeping these two fingers where they're at. There's the C. There I play the lowest note as an E. There's the lowest note as a G. They all work as a C chord, and each have their different purposes. Most of the time, your root position chord is going to do fine, but sometimes you're going to want to add some of those inversions, and that'll really help your playing, add some movement into your playing. For example, let me just kind of play a little bit, and then I'll show you what I'm doing. So all of that was a D, a G, and an A. But it sounded different, and it was moving in different directions because I was adding some of these inversions. So let's talk about it. Let's get back to C. There's a C. There's a C with an E in the bass right there. If I add the G in the bass, I just move my third over here. My third finger. That gets me the G in the bass. Okay? Oh, what else can we do? Let's do maybe an F. There's an F. Some people like to play it like this, just the top part, and avoid the bar. If I add that open A in there, then I get the first inversion, the A in the bass. Gets a little bit different sound. If I add the C, that gets the second inversion, the C's in the bass. What if we did a G? So those are a couple examples there. What if I did a G? Well, there's a G with a B in the bass, the third in the bass. Now, I can't go any lower because I run out of 6 strings, so I've got to go to here, and I would tend to play it like that. This is a G chord with the third in the bass. If I did a D in the bass, well, again, I can't get any lower than the 6th string, so I have to maybe do something high. So some of them sound better than others. What if I did a D chord? If I had a D chord, well, here's a D. Now, the first inversion with a 3rd in the bass would be an F sharp. So if I just switch my fingers around, add that F sharp there. There's a D with an F sharp in the bass. An A, where I can do this. There's the A in the bass. Now, what a lot of guys tend to do, and if they're inexperienced, they'll tend to do this. They'll be playing their D chord, and I'll just play that A in there as well. Now, it works. That A is a note in that chord, and you can do it, but in general, if you're trying to do a root position chord, you want to do a root position chord and not add that lower note into it. But if you're using that like you know what you're doing and you're wanting to add that effect, then there you go. That's how you get it, is by adding that 5th in the bass. But in general, I just don't want to be sloppy. I don't want to use that as an excuse to be sloppy. A lot of guys just do this. Hey, I'm going to play a C minor. And they have this G in there as well. Or I'm going to play an A minor. And you see how muddy that is, adding that low E without voicing it correctly. There's the root position. There's the added low note in there. So some guys just get sloppy with it. Don't do that. Use it with purpose. Make every note that you play a note that has purpose, okay? So we did C, we did G, we did D. If I did an A, there's a good one for that. If I wanted to add the C sharp in the bass, I have to reach over here with my 3rd finger. That's a little bit awkward to do it that way. If I wanted to add the E in the bass, I can, but remember it's going to get a little muddy when I do it that way. Especially when I voice the E and the A next to each other. If I don't do it that way and I just leave the E and then I play the upper notes, it sounds a lot better, a lot cleaner, doesn't it, than when I do this. If I just do this. And all that happened is I took out that middle A that's clashing with that low E. So there you go. What are some other ones? We've done it on major chords. Can we do it on minor chords? Well, yes, but it doesn't tend to work. It's strong on the major chords. On the minor chords, it's not quite as strong. So if I had maybe, let's say, an A minor, and I wanted to add the 3rd in the bass, it kind of just ends up sounding like a C6th rather than an A minor. So we almost kind of lose the character of the minor when we add the 3rd in the bass. So just keep that in mind. So like if I want to play a D minor and add the 3rd in the bass, it's still kind of a D minor, but it just doesn't, it kind of loses a little bit of its identity when we do that. So it's just a little uniqueness in the sound. Now if I add the 5th in the bass, that still works. But for adding the flatted 3rd in the bass of a minor chord, just doesn't really have the same punch that a major chord does. So you can do them in major or minor, but just realize there's a little bit of a difference there. So, okay, let's put some of these bad boys into some progression so you can see what I'm saying. So if you've got a progression that's going from a C to an F, that's a long time in music to just go. And most players are just going to do exactly that. But if you add maybe an C with an E in the bass going to that F, the 3rd in the bass going to that F, it sounds like this. It sounds a little bit cleaner. What if I add a C and then a C with an E in the bass to get to that F, and then an F with an A in the bass after that? So already I've kind of got some, it sounds like I'm moving a lot more than I am. The chords are still C and F, and I'm able to get some different sounds and movement out of it. What if I added a G to that progression? So it's a C, then an F, then a G. Okay, so if I added the 3rd in the bass before all those, I got maybe C, C with an F, sorry, with an E in the bass, F, F with an A, G, G with the B in the bass, C. So it gives you an option for doing movement. What if my chord progression was C, F, and then a G, and then back to C? Sometimes you can substitute the one with the fifth, the second inversion, the one with the fifth in the bass, like a C with a G in the bass. That works good, functioning kind of as a G sus chord. So a C with a G in the bass kind of works like a G sus, which would resolve to a G. So if I did a G, C with a G in the bass, G to a C. I'll do it again. C with a G in the bass, G, C. What if I added a G with a B in the bass to get to that C? C with the G in the bass, G with a B in the G, G with a B in the bass, C. So do you see how it just gives me more options to move around? Now you can, I've been doing open forms here, but you can do movable forms too. So what if I have like, oh, I don't know, a C major seventh? Well, if I wanted to do a C major seventh with an E in the bass, that's a good shape. And I'll try and write these all out in the PDF. Very hip shape. What if I'm doing maybe a G major seventh down here, and I want to give that third in the bass? Ah, that's a great sounding chord too. What if I wanted to do maybe a C major seventh? That's a cool, very way of doing it there. What if I had the G in the bass? That's a C major seventh with a G in the bass. It really kind of smudges out the C major seventh a little bit. So instead of, which there it is, just telling it to you. If I kind of put the fifth in the bass, it kind of just smudges it out a little bit. And sometimes, in the right context, that can be really pretty doing it that way. All of those were just a C and an F and a G with different inversions. So anyway, just some thoughts for that. If we did a few of my favorite progressions, generally we've done a lot of the 1, 4, and 5. C with an E in the bass, the F. If I did that in G, or in G it would be a G, third in the bass, to a C. If I did it in D, it'd be a D, F sharp in the bass. So there just gives you some options. Now, I'm going to give you in the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit more about open voicings and closed voicings and different things that you can do with them, but that's kind of an introductory just blast on what inversions are and how they work on guitar and how you could use them. The first inversion, the root inversion, or the root position, those are good for most of the time. But if I want to add a little something, maybe a little bit of sense of movement or something, a different color in there, I can add the third or the fifth in the bass as well to give me some different options. That's kind of your basic overview of chord inversions. We're going to talk more about that next time because it can get crazy complicated and you can get some wonderful, wonderful sounds with them. But that's kind of the opening introduction to what inversions are. They work for 3-note chords. They work for 4-note chords. I can have a C major seventh with a B in the bass, but it tends to not work as well. But I can if I put the seventh in the bass, but I can do other things. If I had a C seventh, and if I put the B flat, the flatted seventh in the bottom of the bass, that sounds good. What if I did a progression that was like C seventh with the B flat in the bass, F major seventh with an A in the bass, maybe an F minor with a flatted third in the bass, A flat in the bass, C with a G in the bass, D with an F sharp in the bass, C with a G, G, G with B in the bass, C. So let me just play all that for you. A very interesting sounding progression. And all I did was just playing around with these inversions. We'll talk more about that next time, give you some good chord options to go for you, but that's kind of the introduction of how inversions can change. Each one of them has a different flavor, a different purpose, and that you can add to your chord playing. So hang with us for the next couple lessons while we start talking a little bit more about these inversions and how you can add them to your own playing. Hey, I'm Steve Krenz for Guitar Gathering. Keep up the great work in your playing, and we will see you next time.